What if the conflicts you see on the news between Israel and Syria are as old as the Bible itself? Prepare to uncover the deep roots of a feud that spans millennia. In the heart of the Middle East, where ancient sands tell tales older than time, the lands of Israel and Syria stand. These nations, embroiled in one of history's longest-running conflicts, trace their discord back to biblical times, intertwined with stories of ancient prophets and promised lands. Our story begins thousands of years ago, when the region was known not by modern borders, but by the tribes and kingdoms that inhabited it. Israel, known in the Bible as the land given to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has been central to Jewish identity and spirituality. Syria, with its ancient cities like Damascus, one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, has been a crossroads of civilizations, from Arameans and Assyrians to Babylonians and Greeks. Throughout the Old Testament, the relationship between the Israelites and their neighboring nations was often contentious, marked by wars, trade, and treaties. Prophets like Elijah and Elisha crossed these lands, performing miracles and proclaiming divine messages that shaped the spiritual landscape. As we edge closer to contemporary times, the remnants of these ancient interactions have morphed into modern disputes, influenced by colonial legacies and international politics. The creation of the State of Israel in 1948, a joyous moment for Jews, was a point of contention for many Arab nations, including Syria. The ensuing Arab-Israeli wars added layers of complexity to an already complicated relationship, setting the stage for the conflicts we see today. Understanding this backdrop is crucial. It helps us see that the current geopolitical and military tensions are not just about land and sovereignty, but are deeply rooted in cultural, religious, and historical identities. This historical context sets the stage for our exploration into the build-up, main events, and enduring repercussions of the Israel-Syria conflict. As we peel back the layers of history, the Israel-Syria relationship reveals a mosaic of conflicts and cooperation that has evolved over centuries. From biblical battles to medieval alliances, these lands have seen the ebb and flow of power, influence, and territory. In the scriptures, the kingdom of Israel often found itself in conflict with Aramean kingdoms, the predecessors of modern Syria. These skirmishes were more than mere territorial disputes. They were imbued with religious significance, as each side believed their wars were supported by divine will. Notable figures such as King David and King Solomon had interactions with their northern neighbors, sometimes hostile, sometimes peaceful. Fast forward to the Middle Ages, when the region was swept by the tides of the Crusades. Israel and Syria saw a new kind of conflict as European crusaders attempted to seize control of holy sites revered by Christians, Jews, and Muslims alike. This period reshaped the region's demographic and religious landscape, setting the stage for future conflicts. By the Ottoman era, which began in the early 16th century, both regions were provinces within a vast empire that spanned from Europe to Asia. Under Ottoman rule, relative calm prevailed between the Jewish and Arab populations, although this was a time of administrative control rather than outright harmony. This calm was disrupted by the fall of the Ottoman Empire after World War I, when the League of Nations mandated territories, including Palestine and parts of modern Syria, to European powers. The British and French mandates drew arbitrary borders, sowing the seeds for future nationalistic and sectarian strife. The 20th century brought about significant changes as movements for Arab nationalism and Jewish Zionism gained momentum. Tensions escalated with the partition plan proposed by the United Nations in 1947, intended to create separate Jewish and Arab states. The acceptance by Jewish leaders and rejection by Arab leaders, including Syria, led directly to the First Arab-Israeli War following the declaration of the State of Israel in 1948. This historical background is vital for understanding the complexities of the Israel-Syria relationship. It's not just a conflict born out of modern political disagreements, but a deep-seated rivalry rooted in thousands of years of history, influenced by shifting empires, colonial legacies, and competing nationalisms. As the 20th century progressed, the region became a tinderbox of nationalism and competing political ideologies. The build-up to the major confrontations between Israel and Syria was marked by a series of events that heightened tensions and set the stage for conflict. In the decades following the establishment of Israel in 1948, both nations engaged in sporadic skirmishes along their borders. Syria's support for Palestinian militias conducting raids into Israeli territory and Israel's retaliatory strikes exemplified the growing animosity. These incidents were not isolated, but part of a broader strategy by Syria to challenge the legitimacy and stability of the Israeli state, influenced by broader Arab nationalism. The geopolitical landscape of the Middle East was also shaped by the Cold War, with the United States and the Soviet Union vying for influence. Syria, aligning with the Soviet bloc, received substantial military support, which emboldened its stance against Israel, which was increasingly backed by the US. A critical moment came with the nationalization of the Suez Canal by Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser in 1956, which led to the Suez Crisis. This event had a ripple effect, solidifying the Arab-Israeli divide as regional powers took sides. Syria intensified its rhetoric and support for anti-Israel factions, further exacerbating tensions. The waters of the Jordan River became another flashpoint. In the early 1960s, both nations initiated competing water projects to divert resources from the Jordan River. These projects were seen not just as economic but as existential, with each side accusing the other of trying to steal vital resources, leading to frequent clashes. The mounting tensions culminated in the early hours of June 5, 1967, when Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egypt, marking the beginning of the Six-Day War. Syria and Jordan, allied with Egypt, quickly became embroiled in the conflict, which would dramatically alter the boundaries and political realities of the Middle East. This build-up, characterized by strategic positioning, military escalations, and international intrigue, set the stage for a confrontation that was as rapid as it was transformative. The stage was set, the actors were in place, and the curtains were about to be lifted on one of the most pivotal events in the history of the region. The early morning of June 5, 1967, marked a decisive turn in the history of the Middle East. Known as the Six-Day War, this conflict would reshape the geopolitical landscape of the region dramatically. The skies over Egypt, Jordan, and Syria roared with the sounds of Israeli fighter jets, executing what has been described as one of the most successful preemptive airstrikes in military history. Israel, sensing an imminent multi-front attack by its neighbors, decided to strike first. The Israeli Air Force targeted Egyptian airfields, destroying much of Egypt's air capability in hours. As Jordan and Syria responded by entering the war, the conflict quickly escalated. In the northern sector, Syrian forces shelled Israeli communities from the heights of the Golan, a strategic plateau overlooking northern Israel. The response from Israel was swift and fierce. Israeli tanks and troops pushed into the Golan Heights, facing stiff resistance from entrenched Syrian forces. The battles were intense and brutal, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. Amidst the chaos, stories of heroism and tragedy emerged. Civilians in kibbutzim along the border endured relentless bombardment, while soldiers on both sides fought with a ferocity driven by deep-seated fears and historical grievances. By June 10, 1967, a ceasefire was brokered by the United Nations, but the landscape had changed irrevocably. Israel had captured the Golan Heights from Syria, the West Bank from Jordan, and the Sinai Peninsula and Gaza Strip from Egypt. The swift and surprising victory of Israel over its neighbors not only solidified its status as a regional power, but also deepened the animosities and complexities of Arab-Israeli relations. The repercussions of these 6 days of fighting are still felt today, as the battle lines drawn during the war have turned into political boundaries that are contested both on the ground and at the negotiation table. The guns fell silent as the dust settled on the battlefields of the Six-Day War, but the reverberations of the conflict were only beginning to be felt. The immediate aftermath was marked by a profound transformation of the region's political landscape, along with deep emotional and physical scars. In the days following the ceasefire, the world awoke to a new Middle East. Israel's borders had expanded dramatically, nearly tripling in size. For Israel, the victory was seen as miraculous, a validation of their military prowess and strategic acumen, securing territories that were deemed vital for national security. However, this expansion was met with international controversy and laid the groundwork for future conflicts. For Syria, the loss of the Golan Heights was a devastating blow. The strategic plateau from which Syrian forces had once shelled Israeli towns was now under Israeli control. This loss was perceived not only as a military defeat, but also as a humiliation that challenged Syria's status and influence in the Arab world. It sparked a surge of nationalism and an urgent call for a re-evaluation of military strategies and alliances. The emotional toll on civilians and soldiers was staggering. Thousands of families on both sides mourned the loss of loved ones, and many more were displaced from their homes, turning into refugees overnight. The war had redrawn borders, but it had also divided communities and hardened hearts. Internationally, the war prompted a flurry of diplomatic activity. The United Nations quickly passed Resolution 242, calling for the withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from territories occupied in the recent conflict, and the acknowledgement of every state in the area's right to live in peace. This resolution became a cornerstone of future peace negotiations, but its ambiguous language left room for different interpretations, setting the stage for ongoing debates and conflicts. The immediate aftermath of the Six-Day War reshaped not only the physical but also the psychological landscape of the Middle East, with each nation involved drawing different lessons and paths forward from the rubble of the conflict. The Six-Day War, though brief, left a lasting imprint on the Middle East, the effects of which continue to influence geopolitics, national identities, and international relations decades later. The long-term repercussions have been profound and far-reaching, affecting everything from policy decisions to the everyday lives of millions. For Israel, the territorial gains from the war, particularly the Golan Heights, West Bank, and East Jerusalem, bolstered its strategic depth and security. However, these gains also introduced new challenges, including the responsibility and complexities of governing diverse populations with different cultural, religious, and national identities. The occupation led to a prolonged conflict with the Palestinians, who sought self-determination, and ongoing tensions with neighboring Arab countries. In Syria, the loss of the Golan Heights became a national trauma, a symbol of the Arab world's failure to prevent the expansion of Israeli territory. The defeat intensified the Ba'ath Party's grip on power, leading to a more militarized and secretive government under Hafez al-Assad, and later his son, Bashar al-Assad. This shift had significant implications for Syrian society, pushing the country towards more rigid authoritarianism as it sought to reclaim its lost dignity and territory. On a broader scale, the war shifted the dynamics within the Arab world. Egypt, once the leader of Pan-Arabism, began to move towards a more pragmatic approach under President Anwar Sadat. This culminated in the 1979 Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty, which, while successful in ending hostilities between the two nations, isolated Egypt from many of its Arab neighbors. Internationally, the war altered the Cold War's dynamics in the region. The United States and the Soviet Union became even more involved, each backing their respective allies with substantial economic and military aid. This superpower involvement deepened the East-West divide, but also paved the way for American dominance in Middle East peace processes in the later decades. Culturally, the war influenced generations. It was reflected in literature, film, and art across the region, often used as a motif to explore themes of loss, identity, and resistance.